In our previous lesson, we talked about Dependencies Gradle. Now, we're going to talk about build.gradle. Look, both of these are our boot friends. In the main project structure, now I'm coming to build.gradle. In build.gradle, in a normal project, what should normally be there is the addition of plugins, things like group, version, and the Java version. Normally, everything like where the repositories will be pulled from and dependencies are all found in the build.gradle of a project. But what we're going to do here is a slightly different structure. Now, we have our main project structure. There will be modules under our main project structure. For these modules, we'll actually specify the areas in build.gradle that we want to leave as inheritance. Friends. So, we'll define the necessary parameters and say that these should also be used in the subprojects. Let's define these. We'll set it up so that these are also present in the properties of the subprojects. Now, first of all, we define the plugins. Friends. What are plugins? Look, whether it's in Gradle or Maven. Here. In this test section, we have executable structures that you can see. There are a lot of things, like building, getting a native image, cleaning, and so on. And there are even more of these, friends. You probably haven't seen or used most of them. We'll add the things we need here. For Java, for applications, for Spring Boot, for Spring Dependencies, we'll add our plugins here. Let's start adding them, friends. We'll add our plugins here one by one. Plugins are added like this. Friends, you give an ID and write the name of the plugin. For example, the Java plugin. For example, application. For example, these are especially used, so when you open a regular Spring Boot application, you'll already see these. All right. The beautiful Spring. The Spring Framework's own plugin, friends. And here, for the version part, of course, what are we going to use? 3.3.1. We're going to use. We used 3.3.1 here, right? Yes, here too we'll be using the 3.1 plugin. What else are we going to use? Guys, of course, another plugin of ours is also Springs. There's the dependency management, friends. Spring. Dependency. Management. Here, as the version, it's 1.1.5. Of course, you need to check this. I mean, you need to look it up online. What is the latest version, you might ask? Apparently, version 6 has been released. Friends, that's the latest version. Let's add the most up-to-date one. Then don't say, Mohammed Hoka didn't tell us about the latest version. Guys, now, when you define these plugins in the build path, it only defines them, but it doesn't make them effective in the projects. If you want to add this to your current project and its subprojects, here's what you do. All projects. So, what difference does it make when you say all projects? Sir, what happens if we don't write it like this? Or what happens if we do? Now, friends, you can write these outside as well. When you write it outside, it defines the plugins in the build.gradle of the main social media application here. But I'm going to add it underneath this. I also want to inject this into the microservice modules. So then you say apply plugin. You say plugin state, plugin. I'm adding the Java that I defined above. I'm going to add all of these here one by one. Let's do it like this. I'll duplicate this a bit, just to write quickly. What are we going to add? We're going to add application here. Guys, we're going to add awk Spring Brainwork. We're going to add dependency management here. What else is there? And also, there's Java library. Guys, yes, we've come to the real crucial point. Guys, now, another plugin that we'll inject into all other projects isn't actually a plugin. This is something I'll inject into all projects and use, so I need to define it here. Look, now, apply from. Like this, apply from. What are we saying? You say, we have a root directory. Where is this root directory? Guys, the root directory is here, meaning this is the root of the project. Go to the root directory. Yes. The dependencies Gradle inside the root directory. To include it. What did I forget here? I forgot the dot. See, this way, my dependencies Gradle will be linked to all projects. Guys, I'll be transferring these over. So actually, including my main project and all my sub-projects, they'll all be able to use that library section that exists in dependencies Gradle. This part is done. Guys, now let's continue with the others. What else are we going to do? I'm going to say sub-projects, meaning add these to all my sub-projects. Let the group ID be this. For example, I usually set the group as home.mohammed. Guys, you can define the version. So, for instance, my version is 0.1. What else? Guys, you can write here the version of Java you're using, or the version you'll use when you get it this year. Here. You define both the source and the target. Guys, you define the target as well, friends. Java versions 0.21. Guys, that's the version I'm using. And also the target as Java version 21. I do this as well. You definitely need to add these too. One of the important points, friends. Since you're using Turkish while compiling Java, you might use Turkish characters or perform operations related to Turkish. In that case, to avoid any issues here, you definitely need to add this. Friends. As task with type. First, you write this, then you say a Java compile. In the Java compile section, mine is. Mine. Okay, yes. Mine. You will specify the encoding you will use. You say config for here, friends. Options.encoding is set to UTF-8, and this is a crucial setting for proper character handling. There will be no problem. Yes. In all my projects, I will be using this for compile operations as UTF-8. Friends. Now, I have also done the basic other coding related to my projects, my calculation projects. Now, I'm continuing. Now I need to add all the repositories, build scripts, dependencies that all my projects will use. I need to add all of them here. For this, I say all projects, add to all projects. What should we add? The repositories you'll use. Which parts of the repositories will you use? Which repositories will we use? Let's use Maven Central. Then let's use Google. We use these in our applications. Anything else? We have our build scripts. Guys, for those as well, repository is Maven Central in the same way. I'm adding this too. Also, regarding the injection of these plugins for the dependencies of all subprojects, there's a Gradle plugin from Spring Boot. That needs to be added as well. So, either you'll add it here. The most correct method, the most correct place, is actually here, or you'll have to add it to every single submodule you create. I don't really recommend doing that. Here, you go to the Dependencies section. You need to write this thing here by saying class path. This is something related to Spring Boot. Guys, the Spring Framework Boot, specifically focusing on Spring Boot with Gradle, provides a robust and efficient way to develop applications. Plugin. And there will also be a version for this. Guys, where were we getting the version from? Look, we already injected it into all the projects from here. So, we added the dependency management here. That's why I'm saying here. Versions.springboot. Look, where is this coming from? It's coming from here. Look, here, versions.springboot. The thing I added here is also versions.springboot. Spring Boot comes from here, because I already said that I would use dependencies Gradle in all my projects. So, when I do it this way, it will inject without any problems. Guys, this is how you do it as well. Let's make sure we don't make any typos. Spring Boot Gradle plugin. Yes, we didn't make any typos here. Now, let's move on to the Dependencies section. The Dependencies section, in other words, let's see how we will import the dependencies we've defined here. Now, the only thing I'm going to add to the applications anyway is Spring Boot Web. Guys, I'm not going to add anything else, because first, I want to run it in its purest, most empty state, just to see how it works. Does Spring Boot really go to the submodules? If it does it work? I want to see that. That's why I added the dependency here. I say implementation. Look, what do you normally write here? Normally here, you would print the parameter you got from the relevant memory repository. That's not the case anymore. Now, you don't do it with the memory repository. Why? Because you have a dependencies Gradle. Look, here I took the boot where I kept the dependencies Gradle. Because my boot doesn't have to be like this either. Guys, this dependencies Gradle, it could also be somewhere else. I mean, it could be somewhere in the cloud. You might be pulling it from somewhere else. The team might be sending it to another place. You might be getting the dependencies from somewhere else. That's why this management is a bit different. But I set it up like this with boot so that I could easily access your own projects. You can take it from here and use it. Let's use it. How will we use it? Move this aside. No confusion. You should do it like this when using it, too. Here, you say implementation. Look, when I say Libs, this Libs here, this is Libs, friends, teacher. How does it recognize this Libs from here? It recognizes it from the dependencies Gradle above. Here, you type Libs. Then what will you add? You will add Spring Boot, Starter, and so on, friends. Now that it's added, teacher, it does this, like it underlines it and stuff. It's not a problem, friends. This is absolutely not a problem. There won't be any issue with it recognizing this. It won't cause you any problems. We'll see that in a moment anyway. If you want to add the test platform, friends, I usually add it to my projects. I write tests. Usually, when I say QNIT platform, that gets added as well. Please, when you're writing these, pay attention to the parentheses and exactly where I put things, just like I do. Otherwise, if you make a mistake or skip something, there can be a lot of problems. They can be really big, and you might not even realize it, just because of a single parenthesis or something like that. Now, after writing these parameters into all projects, finally, where is the N6 configurations? Ah, right there. Here, we're actually doing this for annotation processes. These are compile only. Addison compile. I think it's compile only. Or is it? Its usage has changed. Or maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Extent from. Configurations. This part is correct. Compile only. This part is also correct. I'm sure I'm writing it correctly. Extent from. Annotation processor. I wrote this correctly, but it didn't complete me. I don't know. It's not a problem. This is correct. Guys, it needs to be written this way. All right. So, what have we done now? We've also completed our build.gradle as it should be. Guys, let's refresh this like this. Let's see. Now, when you refresh this, there's a build section here. Guys, look. When the process in this build section is finished, it should show up as successful in green like this. If you don't get this, if there's an error here, you need to check and pay attention to these things. Guys, let me bring it up like this so you can see it in dependencies in Gradle. Either you have a typo here, or there's a problem in the parts where you transfer from there to here, or while writing these. Now look, in external library, you'll see that all the dependencies related to Spring have come in. Look, everything related to Spring Boot has been added here. Guys, how did it get here? I added Spring Boot Starter Web. Look, right here. This is how it appears in the thing I added, Libs. I'm adding the K here. This K gives me the value from dependencies in Gradle, right here. And it actually builds on top of that. This really makes things much easier, and when you're coding in a microservice architecture, it makes updates and tracking versions much easier. Guys, now we've sorted out this part as well. Guys, we can move on to creating our models now. Guys, see you in the next lesson.